You're listening to Travel Tales with Fergal.
Hello, my name is Fergal O'Keefe and you're very welcome to the podcast. You're very welcome to part 2 of my Kerry destination special in conjunction with Ireland's Blue Book, celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Wide Atlantic Way, which stretches 2,500 kilometres along the west coast of Ireland from Donegal to Cork. By the way, the Blue Book is also celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. Today we focus on Kerry, probably one of Ireland's most famous tourist destinations, with an interview with proprietor Frank Slattery from Carrig Country House. And if you haven't already, I'd recommend you go back and listen to part 1 with Patrick Handley from the Lansdowne Kenmare after this episode. I always recommend Ireland's Blue Book to people because they're generally family owned and run Irish country house hotels, manor houses, castles and restaurants. You really get to see Irish hospitality at its best, and the properties are generally old country houses, so you get a real sense of the history of the area you're staying in. And their website is irelands-blue-book.ie. The Carrig Country House is hidden away on Carrig Lake in Kerry and lies at the foot of the northern slopes of the McKillicuddy Reeks at the head of the Carrig Valley. It's a magnificent, tranquil location midway between the bustling towns of Killorgan to the east and the charming village of Glenbeigh and Rossbay Beach to the west. For more details, check carrighouse.com. Let's hear from Frank now. Frank, you're very welcome to the podcast. Great to see you.
Thank you, Fergal.
I was in Kerry last week, and I have to say that there's just something magical about Kerry. I often say that actually going to a place where tourists are give a place a buzz, but the buzz around Kerry, it was just amazing. It really is, isn't it?
There is, I suppose, particularly in South Kerry, Fergal, because Killarney being the hub, for so much tourism and everything. And in South Kerry, I would say the good land is in North Kerry. And the poor land is in South Kerry, but most of the tourism is in South Kerry, But there is a buzz, and even from when I was up at a funeral in Clare last week, a cousin of mine, and there's a buzz around Lahinch as well, tourist golf, all that sort of thing. It's amazing what it does, And I think it also affects the attitude of the local people as well, In Kerry, as I'm sure in Clare as well, any tourist area, there's a sort of a tourist culture amongst the locals. People have been doing it for generations, and you notice that sometimes when you go to other counties that are non-tourist, that there's a different type of a good service, but not as friendly, I think, as what you have in tourist counties, and particularly now, of course, on the Wild Atlantic Way, as we said,
And have you really noticed that, it's the 10th anniversary of the Wide Atlantic Way. Yes. Have you noticed that over the years? Did it make a big difference?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, first of all, went into hospitality 45 years ago, and which is a lifetime ago. But definitely you can see that it is like the Wild Atlantic Way has always been there, of course. Exactly. But it's just the way the Falch Ireland and previously Tourism Ireland as well, of course, the Board Fáilte, brought it to life and brought it all together. I think it just captured the imagination of tourists generally. Even the name, the Wild Atlantic Way, and you have 500 kilometres nearly from Cork to Donegal, and it is truly amazing, And I've travelled quite a bit over the years when the kids finished college and that, and with my wife Mary, who's a Kerry woman. And we've been on the Garden route in South Africa and the Great Ocean Drive in Australia. They just wouldn't compare. The Great Ocean Drive, we were driving through forests and hills for a good part of it,
It's true.
Very beautiful drive. Both of them are very beautiful. But I still, the ruggedness of the Wild Atlantic Way, every corner you go around. And even I say that even about the Ring of Kerry as well. And when we come back, sometimes we go away for the winter because we're a seasonal business. And you come back and you drive around the Ring of Kerry, maybe go down into West Cork a bit. And it's absolutely gorgeous,
As always, Kerry, we're ahead of the curve. The Ring of Kerry has always been there, really, isn't it?
Well, that's true. And of course, I suppose Kerry has been a tourist destination for longer than most other places. And of course, Killarney, I think they say how Killarney started off was Queen Victoria or something visited way back, and that's how more or less got tourism going there. But yeah, and the Americans seem to love the Kerry and Connemara as well now too, and we would have people coming from West Cork going up to us and maybe going on to Connemara, and then another year they might go from Connemara up to Donegal. I think very few people do the whole expanse in the one shot, because it is a lot of driving. And you want to sit and enjoy it. You don't want to be driving all the time, yeah.
Yeah. And so your place, the Carrig Country House, where is that based? Where are you?
That is actually, we're equidistant from Killorglin and Glenbeigh, just about a mile off the main ring of Kerry Road. It's a secluded place right down on Carrig Lake. And Carrig Lake is about 9 miles long by about 4 miles wide, surrounded by hills. And we have a backdrop of the McGillicuddy Reeks and the Kerry Mountains behind the lake as well. We're looking across, if you like, at that. It was an old hunting lodge. Like the British owned it. I think we're the first Irish owners in about 160 years. The British owned it up to actually Lord Brockett was the guy who owned it, and he owned Carton House, and he owned Cashel Palace and a whole lot of those places. Quite late, most British had probably left in the 20s and 30s, but they owned property up to the 50s and even the 60s. So then we have had various British people owning it during the war, the Second World War years. A guy called Arthur Rose Vincent, who was actually from East Clare family originally. They were Anglo-Irish, I think, and he was a judge out in Eastern Africa. He came back and he married this guy, Bourne's daughter, and Bourne had owned the waterworks, the whole water system in San Francisco, and he bought the whole national, which is now the National Park, and Mucker's House, off of the Guinness family, and he gave it as a wedding present to his daughter, who married this guy Arthur Rose Vincent. I don't think I wasn't quite as lucky when I met my wife.
But it's amazing. Yeah, that was some gift, wasn't it? So they
absolutely.
left
but the interesting thing was they handed it over. She died rather young, and he and his second wife, who was French, came and lived here for a number of years before they emigrated to the States. So there is a little connection between Carrig House and Mucker's House, and they handed it over gratis to the state, Bourne and Arthur Rose Vincent, which of course became a fantastic national park. I think there are about 20,000 acres or something in the national park there, which is a great asset for us as well as the people of Killarney, because we're only about 35 minutes from there. And, you can cycle off-road and everything there. And it's just a wonderful place. And of course, a second national park has just now been added in Dingle, I think, Park Nashunta and the Heron, I think they're calling it. And that also is an absolutely beautiful wilderness, very different from the Killarney National Park. This will be much more sort of pristine land, mountains, lakes, that sort of thing, Yeah. It's a beautiful area. I don't know if you've been out there in that area.
Yeah. And is that does that include the Connor Pass? That's all that area around there?
That's where you would you'd be able to see best get a bird's eye view there. If you were up at the top of the Connor Pass, there's a viewing point there. You can look down, and there's some lovely little bowl lakes and that sort of thing in the middle of the mountains and hills out there. So that'll be a huge asset.
Yeah. And do you get guests coming back every year? Or not every year, but regulars?
Yes, we would have a lot of regular guests. We would get quite a lot of our. We have two different types of business. Our off season, which would be March, April, and maybe into the first 2 weeks of May, would be predominantly Irish. And again in October, and we close at the end of October. And then from from June to September, it would be mainly American and continental Europe, with some Irish and a smattering of English. And some people also from the north of Ireland. They've been coming to us for years, this group. They're coming in a couple of weeks' time. They come down here to golf and play a number of the Kerry golf courses. because we have about 15 golf courses. The max, Ballybunion probably would be the farthest one. That's about an hour and a half. But nearest one is Dukes, which is just 10 minutes. And you have Tralee, Waterville, you have them all around them. Killarney, of course. You have 2 courses there.
When you think of it, like some of the best golf courses in the world, all within
amazing.
distance.
The links, I suppose they rate to Tralee, Ballybunion and Waterville now would be up there with the likings of Lahinch, Portmarnock and all those, yeah. Just to tell you one little thing, I told you we were the first Irish owners of Carrig House. Before us, it was a German who owned the place. So, and he had bought it. It's a bit ironic because he bought it off the British. There was a whole lot of British people here up to Irish independence, all around the lake. I'd say we're all Victorian houses, and this is a Victorian house as well. And then a whole lot of German people came, probably in the 50s and the 60s, and around the time of the Cold War and that. The story is they wanted to get as far away from Russia as they could, which probably most people nowadays want to do again. Yeah. They liked this area here, and a lot of them would have reminded them of parts of Germany with the forests and the lakes and that. And in actual fact, Carrig Lake area, when we came here 28 years ago, the nickname was Little Berlin, because there were so many German people living around. Most of it now is Irish owned, and with very few, because the next generation of German people didn't come. It was that generation that came,
I think it's amazing. Like, was it 96 when you bought the place?
96, yeah.
Amazing. Before that, the history of that house. Because how old is it? Does it go back to the 80s?
It goes back to about around the famine time, probably maybe around 1860, around there somewhere.
Amazing.
We've been able to get the deeds back, not quite as far as that, but I know it was built around that now. It was much smaller than it is now. We added on a whole new wing, but we tried to keep it in keeping with the Victorian, the rest of the house. We did that in the year of 9/11. I'll never forget it, because we had spent a fortune putting on about 12 or 13 new bedrooms, and we just had opened in the spring. And we were lucky because the reason we did it is we needed the rooms because the business was coming in, a lot of American. But of course, if 9/11 had come in May, we were gone for our tea. It was that way because we borrowed a lot of money at the time to put that on. But then it sort of, a couple of years after that, the Americans didn't fly. And but then it all evened out again, and we do a good American business in the summer months.
And how long have you been part of the Blue Book?
Oh, we've been part of the Blue Book now, I think possibly about 14 years.
Wow, okay.
And there was another Blue Book property, which would be our second next neighbour, and they actually was sold to as a private house to actually a friend of mine, and he obviously keeps it as a private. And then, the Blue Book will not allow 2 houses to sit side by side. So when that happened, we applied, and we are extremely happy because it's a great organization. And the good thing about the Wild Atlantic Way and the Blue Book is that there's a Blue Book property in every county, and more than one in many counties, right from Cork to Donegal, which is, if anybody does want, they can do the Wild Atlantic Way using the Blue Book because they know the level of service is the same, and the majority are family owned and family, not all, but the majority. So, and a lot of them will have local staff, which I think is important for the simple reason is, at breakfast you have a waitress and they're serving and they're talking, well, what's that over there in the hill, or where will we go today? Now, Mary and I and Claire and Kevin, our son-in-law, do that role after breakfast, talking to people and saying, well, we think this is where you go, or where do you think you want to go today, and advising them about, maybe the Dingle Peninsula or the Ring of Kerry. They would be the 2 big day trips, road trips, if you like, in Kerry. And we're dead center between the 2 of those,
Exactly. And where locally would you recommend, like local beaches or? Oh
yeah, well, Ross Bay Beach is just 10 minutes away from us here. There's a beach at Dukes as well, which isn't as well known. That's just beside the golf club there. But the one at Ross Bay is a fine long beach, and it almost dovetails with Inch Beach, which comes off the Dingle Peninsula.
Yeah.
So those would be two beaches, and they do quite a bit of windsurfing on Inch Beach as well. And Inch Beach would be probably about a half an hour away from it, because you have to go by a road around to get on the Dingle Peninsula there. But Ross Bay is a fabulous beach for swimming. And now a lot of the beaches now I see they're using the type gypsy caravan type of thing for saunas and that.
Yeah.
And have them very close to the beach, so you can jump out of the sauna and run out across the strand into the water, you know. And Cremorne is another place beside it as well. Cremorne is a fishing village, and you can swim there as well. But that would be a slightly more stony beach. There's a beautiful sandy beach in Ross Bay.
And do people go on the lake? Do they go out on boats?
They do, yeah. And they would. I see a few people sailing who'd have little mirrors of that, not very big ones, you know. And we see a little bit of kayaking is very popular on the lake, particularly at dawn and at the evening at dusk. It's a lovely time on the lake. It's quiet. The birds are sort of waking up or going to sleep and singing and that. And there's a local chap in Enda who does kayak tours on the lake and that, which is nice, you know.
Do you notice with the Blue Book, you know, people often get it as wedding gifts. Do you notice?
Oh, yeah.
So do you notice that like it's often couples, I'm thinking of myself included, where it's nearly their first kind of holiday away after they get married, or
True.
Do you ever notice that?
Oh, we do, of course, yeah. A lot of it will come from engagement presents sometimes, definitely wedding presents, extremely popular with wedding presents, and also retirements then for old fellas like me, at the other end of the spectrum.
Oh, that's gas. That's a good point. My wife got one. The last time we used the Blue Book was my wife was moving job, and she got it as a gift, actually. Yeah. And it was great because
you know, because you have a choice of over 50 properties, and you know, at the time there when the unfortunate burst that we had in the country, people got very nervous because they thought individual hotels would go wallop, and some of them were unfortunately going wallop. And then you had 51, or maybe that time we had just about 40, but still it was plenty. And you knew your voucher was good. There were plenty of places that you could go to. Then you have city places, you have country places, but it was predominantly a country house scene. I suppose Ballymaloe probably being the most famous one, you know.
I can just see the sun is shining through, trying to get through behind you. So it must be.
Oh, yes, it's struggling a bit today. We had a couple of lovely days, but today is a little bit misty, but it is just trying to peep in the window there behind me.
But you know what? I could imagine your place is as gorgeous in like a rainy days, because it's the type of place you could just sit indoors and chill out, isn't it? Do you know?
Yeah, well, we're surrounded by trees, and sometimes you might see a photograph there from the lake, and it's nestled in amongst the trees. And we have roaring fires on in a couple of different locations in the drawing rooms and that. And it is a place, winter or summer, that you could, or a bad day, or as I say, a sunny day, you can sit out in the lawns. We have lovely gardens there, and we have about, 950 species of plants there. We're only responsible for about probably 25% of those. I'd say the Victorians, when they came, and the various people, they brought stuff back from the colonies and that. I remember when we were in Australia that time, and we visited New Zealand for a short period, so I got all these magnificent plants, because subtropical plants, we have a lot of subtropical, they grow here in South Kerry. As you go around the ring, even down around Caherdaniel and Partnersill and all that area, you'll see lots of tropical plants. So the gardener at the time was an English chap, and I brought all these back. I said, look what I got now, more exotic subtropical plants. He says, I don't know why you brought those home. You have them here already. Now, I wouldn't be a green fingers, I have to admit, but I do admire the plants. We have some beautiful ones. They're just starting to bloom now at this time of year, and it's fabulous to see the various colours and that, azaleas, and then later on the hydrangeas. And of course, the wild rhodos. I love the wild rhodos. You know, we have to control them, but the beautiful purple flower is just out now, you know.
Particularly this time of year. It is amazing, isn't it?
Absolutely. No, it's great. So it's a story. And we have we have a restaurant here as well, of course, and it's been a big part of our business because we're open to non-residents as well. And a lot of people would stay in other hotels or guest houses or whatever, or a lot of holiday homes in the areas near Duke's Golf Club and out at Glenbeigh and that. So there's a good lot of business comes to us from outside, as well as, of course, our guests. We just have 17 rooms, so we're relatively small. And as we say, it's family run, so it's very personal. But, I always say personal but unobtrusive. We leave people to their own devices, but we're there to give them information. And
I know.
And all our staff are from the radius of a few miles of here, so they have good local knowledge and that,
And that's the big thing, isn't it?
Irish wit as well, I think.
But that's the big thing, like, that the tourists love is that personal touch. That's what's so special, isn't it? Like, particularly, owner-run hotels or restaurants or bars. That's what makes us.
I agree with you, and I think that's what the Blue Book is all about generally. And but there are people, who like to go to, we'll say, big 5-star hotels, which are probably anonymous to a certain extent, and that's what they want. But definitely, a lot of the tourists coming into the country, they want to meet you, they want to meet the locals, they want to go to the local pubs, listen to the stories and the crack and the whole carry on, which is great. One thing I should have mentioned, first of all, we're part of the Reeks district, which is this whole catchment area around mid-Kerry. You have the mountains, the lakes, and anybody who might be interested in activities in that, if they went on reeks.com, they'll pick up a lot of information. It's a mine of information. And of course, the main thing here, the Skellig Mayhall, Skellig Michael.
Yeah.
The Skellig Rock is only about 35, 40 minutes to the Port Magee, where the
it's magical, isn't it? I haven't actually. I've been Port Magee, and looked out at it, but I so regret. My wife went on a boat trip. She went diving off it, scuba diving. I went to a Clare match. I think this was back in the 90s when Clare were on a run, and I went to the hurling match instead. But I always regretted it because she said it was amazing. But it's just there's something very magical about that place, isn't there?
Oh, there is. And the whole thing, the history of it with the monks living out there, and they were living on fish and seabirds and stuff like it. Was real, you want to be a real hermit to be living on. And in the wintertime, the waves are crashing, and it is a bleak spot, but a beautiful spot, of course.
We talk about magical, like the whole county is magical. I remember when I was sort of out of college and going there on a trip with my girlfriend at the time, now wife, and I remember ringing back home and going, gosh, I think Kerry might be more beautiful than Clare, because in my head, I was always Clare is the most beautiful place in the world. I was nearly in shock going, my God, there's somewhere else that's nearly more, it's so dramatic, Kerry, isn't it?
Yes, oh, absolutely. Well, I think, you have the lakes, the mountains, the beaches and that. When I was driving up to Lahinch last week, I was pointing out to Mary, I said, Mount Callan that's probably the highest mountain in Clare, which is basically a hill in Kerry.
Exactly.
But I say when I love that drive as well from Quilty, you could say right up to Kinvara, up along the Cliffs Dual and right up it is beautiful as well. But Kerry has so much going for it, really, north and south, and it is probably the prime tourist country, both for Irish tourists and for non-Irish, continental.
Exactly. Well, listen, thank you so much. I've taken so much of your time.
No, not at all. Delighted to talk with you, and hopefully we'll see you in Carrig someday.
Yeah, oh, definitely. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Frank as much as I did doing the interview. I'd also recommend you to go back to part 1 to listen to Patrick talk about the area around Kenmare and the Ring of Kerry. And I think both episodes give a great overview of that magical county of Kerry. And keep an eye out over the next few weeks for more episodes of Blue Book hotels along the Wild Atlantic Way. I also want to thank the Blue Book, who have 63 properties all over Ireland, and I highly recommend people, if you're looking for a lovely place to stay, family run, the Blue Book is the one. Check their website, irelands-blue-book.ie. I would ask if you could please subscribe to Apple Podcast so a new episode will appear in your library every week. I would also really appreciate if you could leave a rating and a review, as it helps others to discover this podcast. To find out who's on every Tuesday, please follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Travel Tales with Fergal. Stay safe and keep dreaming of future travels.
Travel Tales with Fergal.